Yeah.
Do we have Ryan?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm Dogemos. Surprise, surprise, I'm actually not a dog. Real person living in Korea. I've been a pretty active community member of the Cosmos ecosystem for a little over a year and a half. And yeah, so I really want to take this time today just kind of reflecting on like how much we have achieved and what has happened. Just kind of a time of reflection and also anticipation moving forward. Also really like a big shout out to everyone because I think we have like 10 countries represented here. It's like, I really think like the whole geographical, like cultural decentralization really picked up quickly in the Cosmos community and really excited about that. So yeah, do you guys want to do, I guess we have introductions for these five guys. Would you like to introduce yourself back then?
Yeah, sure. My name is Haifeng. I'm a co-founder and CTO of Iris project.
I'm Riccardo, co-developer at Commerce Network.
I'm Jeeuk from Node 18. I'm in charge of operations and communications for my team.
I'm Kwun from Mobile.
I'm Brian from Everett. Not sure what I do.
Oh boy.
I'm JK from stakefish.
I guess the first question, just to start off, would be, so I think it's been about, what's the date today? 9th. So in about 4 days, I think we'll have the 7-month anniversary of the Cosmos mainnet launching. So in this past 7 months, what do you think is like the most proudest achievement for the Cosmos ecosystem at level? It's been a while. A lot has happened. So.
Yeah, I think the most exciting thing is to see all these projects built on top of Cosmos SDK emerging, right? I mean, as one of the earliest blockchains built on it, Cosmos SDK launched in March. We're very excited and proud about what we have done, but we also have seen projects like Terra, Kava, and IOV, which will be launching tomorrow, and all the other projects that people have introduced here. So I think that shows us that Cosmos is really a very dynamic and fast-growing community. This is an ecosystem that we should all be very proud of.
So I think that this is totally correct, and I also think that the speed at which exchanges picked up the token itself shows that the project has a real value and people believe in it. So yeah, we can see that people start using it as a token and as an exchange token, and also as the SDK to build projects. And I think it's really, really cool to see how things go up quickly, and we have new projects coming up each and every day.
I'm personally really happy to see many projects like Haifeng said about, but also as a validator, I like seeing how like all the conversations and all the governance decisions are not only made by Cosmos team, but all the validators and community people got involved, and not in an asset perspective, but in an opinion perspective, it seemed very decentralized, like a blockchain was supposed to be. I'm really proud of how Cosmos got there really quickly.
Right. So I think everybody agree that there is a very good, strong community in Cosmos. It was like because we are all like friends over the last year, but I know that after the launch of Cosmos Hub mainnet, a lot of validators have become very busy after that. So, and that's what we see during the Cosmos Hub 3 upgrade, because we were all very busy. None of us were testing the software before the launch, and suddenly it failed. But what we see is that it's like we are all like Avengers. When the problem comes, all the validators just appear at that moment. It's like Cosmonauts, validators assembled, and I really like that. I really like how Cosmos community is working together to solve problems and make decisions quickly. And yeah, that's what Cosmos achieved.
Awesome. If we're the Avengers, do we have like Captain Cosmos here? Maybe. Dogemos. Captain Doge. Anyway, personally, one of the most impressive stuff in the Cosmos community that I observed is, it's a bit of a sad fact, but a lot of the validators on Cosmos, they are not making any kind of profits right now, but they are true believers of the network, I believe. And just because of Cosmos, we are able to assemble in a foreign country like Japan from all over the world. And I think it's very cool that just by this Cosmos network, we are able to achieve and assemble things like this.
This will sound like a broken record because we all talked of a community, but like, let me give another take because we validate on a bunch of chains and we are participants in other protocols as well. But of those, Cosmos is one of the few protocols that actually had community growth. There were a lot more projects launching, a lot more developers becoming interested and asking us questions compared to any of the other protocols that we're on right now. And so I think that's a huge positive, really, especially in this sort of bear market.
I actually really wanted that. The next question was really highly related to Kwun's point because obviously, like in 7 months, a lot has gone right, but a lot has gone wrong. And the nice thing is there's no Tendermint team here today. It's a completely unofficial community organized event, so can be all honest. And obviously, I think early on the focus has been very much on validating, validation, commission, and like Brian mentioned, a lot of them are making money. And I don't know, like from a project's perspective, I think a lot of validators are going on multiple chains. Obviously, there's that aspect of they like the project and they see big potential, but maybe also to supplement the lack of income. And I'm just kind of curious if people are like starting to get worried about the fact that when validators are managing so many different chains, is there concern on security, and how do you see that going, and how do we solve that?
Because we are like the creator of a IrisNet project. We're not like in the validation business, so I cannot answer that question directly. But I can understand, like from a perspective of validation operator. I think in the long term, of course, if the price goes up, all problems go away, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, another thing is for those validators who has the validation as their core business, I think the more projects they validate in, the more amortization they will see. They will notice, right? You just put in one high quality secure infrastructure in place, and you can validate in multiple projects. That can reduce the cost. And of course, I think the belief part is also very important. If we really believe in the value that Cosmos ecosystem can bring to the industry, and in the long term, I think at least some of the projects that you validate in will go to the moon. So that will just solve your problem.
So as a core developer, I don't actually manage the validator node yet, but I can answer probably your question, your second question about how we can deal with this. I think we shouldn't, because it's like free of development. Everyone is free to develop their token. It's their job to show developers that their token is more valuable than others. So I think that even right now, validators, as Hung said, are too busy and are probably like sorting out which tokens they are going to validate. So I'm pretty sure that there is no validator here that validates actually all the chains that exist. So we're already starting to see in this competition between tokens and chains themselves. So I don't think we should like manage this from an external point of view. We should just like be like the way it is right now. So yeah.
I'm not a developer or like the core infrastructure guy. I'm just a community guy. But in my perspective, what becomes difficult for validating multiple chains is that there's so many updates and like so many channels that you have to refer to. It's really difficult. But like as long as you have a process of every day which channels that you have to keep updated to, I think validating for multiple chains shouldn't be a problem. But I think security perspective, I guess, preparing for monitoring for different chains separately, I think that's a separate part, but that actually requires more work, which is true. And I think all validators should be reasonably prepared to do that, because you're not going to join a chain as a validator and just like leave it just that way and not see what's going on. And that's when the disaster happens. And even if it's just one of your chains, if you lose one of that, it's gonna be news and you're gonna lose all your reputation too. So you gotta be careful about monitoring and keep yourself updated.
So when if a validator is going to validate more chains, it increases the resources of DevOps. You need more DevOps to manage more chains. And yeah, it does, I would say it does affect a little bit on security if you don't have enough resources on that. And that's why we choose, most likely we focus more on the Cosmos-based chains first, because we can duplicate our experience and our toolset to different chains which are developed with Cosmos SDK, and we try not to validate more protocol in different technology stacks. So we pick very carefully, and I think because validators also contribute to the community otherwise. Yeah, because validators are actually those who run the network. If they would like to make the token price rise, then they have to contribute and like spread the word about the network. So I think, validators should consider how to balance this. Otherwise, the whole business will just fall.
Okay, I just heard a lot of interesting answers. I'm sorry, what was the exact question again?
As Cosmos grows to an internet of multiple blockchains,
Okay.
will sharing a validator across chains cause concerns on security of the whole ecosystem?
Oh, well, it might be a bit off topic, but one of the real big advantages I saw on Cosmos is that the upgradability of the network and the governance is just my personal opinion, but I think it's the most smoothest transitions, and I think it's the most decentralized among all other platforms. So say for example, if you want to upgrade a Ethereum smart contract, it's a huge pain. It's either going to be centralized or it's going to be very difficult to upgrade. But in the case for Cosmos, if the validators that run the network agree on upgrading the network, then the upgrade will happen. So
Centralized.
Centralized. Sorry, I wasn't able to hear that.
Well, it's more centralized. If it's run by validators, then we all know each other.
Oh, well, for the point of capitalism is not to always reach the ideal point from the start. The point of that is to gradually improve our current systems. So obviously it will be the best when we could have an ideal decentralized upgradable system. However, I think it's still better to have something that works right now than just wish for something ideal to come out in like 100 years. It's better to have something working right now that's better than the current system. Anyways, for validators running multiple networks, I am also a bit concerned on this part as well. However, I don't think I have a good enough explanation for it. It's just my personal feeling. But anyways, I think free market dynamics will do a bit of a trick here, although it's not going to be like Pareto efficient. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's really challenging being on multiple networks, without a doubt, especially because we're not just on Cosmos, we're on different, we're on EOS and Tezos, which is entirely different. So, I mean, the answer is yes, it's a concern, but there's a bigger concern regarding sustainability of validators, because exchanges have entered, they're entering, like they're slowly growing in ranking, but don't let that fool you. These guys once they turn their lights on, they're really gonna dominate the game. So exchanges entering, accumulating more stake will be a threat, definitely, for sustainability for a lot of the independent validators. And it's really up to validators to really try to find out what the sustainable business model is. Just relying only on the fees of staking wars, I don't think is the answer so far. At least that's sort of my semi-conclusion. I'm ready to be challenged on that, but so far I'm really constantly looking for other business models, and I think Adrian has sort of summarized what exists so far, but there needs to be more experiments done. And Ryan, you guys are working on Everett, this is one avenue, because staking derivatives needs to be created, and that's maybe one of the ways how validators can compete with exchanges.
Don't you think that, do you think that having a validator that simply just validating, you think that would not be a profitable scheme in the long run? Should validators be able to survive just by validating, or is it required that they find other avenues of income?
My thought is that the validator economics were supposed to be designed to compensate for the costs that they're paying to for their infrastructure or for their rent, but just their business in general. So it would depend a lot on the token cost, the price of the token, but the design itself should be aimed to help validators sustain their business just by their validator rewards. And doing something additional on top of that is their business plan, and it should be their additional profit, but just by validating, I think you should be able to break even at least in terms of design. Yeah.
I personally think that you need to be, if you create a validator and just put a validator node there without doing anything, probably it really depends on the chain-like specification. But if you have something like Cosmos Network, where you have the top 100 validators that are actually validating, if you don't do something with the community, you don't make yourself known to the users, no one will delegate to you, and then you will eventually exit the top 100 and then fall back and you won't get any reward. So it really depends on how the chain specification is and what you can do with it. If you have unlimited validators, then yeah, surely why not, but I don't think any chain will have something like that.
So of course the token price affect everything, and so we have to consider how the token price will change. Most likely, if the token is very useful, is very valuable, then the token price will rise up, right? And then the validators will be happy with the rewards. So I think the problem is how the community can generate more values on the chain, like more applications, more users to adapt on using the chain, more different side products, byproducts, I don't know. And so I think it is how the community to it's just like Ethereum, why Ethereum will be so successful, because they have a strong community to develop different apps, and then so more people will get into the ecosystem, and this is how they push the value and the token price up. So yeah, so if the validators would like to be profitable, they cannot just sit and wait and get reward, but they have to do more community work or even some developments on the apps that utilize the chain.
I think when we talk about the Cosmos, we have to think of the Cosmos network or ecosystem as a whole. So the difference between Cosmos and other projects is we're not talking about one chain. We're talking about a whole network, internet of blockchains. So I think, to answer your question, I think a validator should be able to sustain itself by validating on the Cosmos network, by choosing a set of blockchains that's built on Cosmos SDK that suits his or her needs. And also on the perspective of the project, so I mean from the perspective of the tooling, I think we're still at an early stage of the Cosmos SDK. For example, take Iris Network as an example. When we first launched the network on March the 1st, we had to do some customization to the Cosmos SDK, which resulted in the difference in terms of APIs and ways of doing maintenance and upgrade, right? So I think, as you have noticed, I mean, as Cosmos SDK and Tendermint become more and more stable and mature, and we see more tooling added to code space, it will be easier and cost-effective to maintain a validator on multiple networks. And you will start noticing certain degrees of homogeneity of doing the DevOps on multiple chains. That's from the technical point of view. And one thing that we really do very well and we're proud of in Iris Network is we have made it a mandatory feature before we launch the mainnet to be able to upgrade the blockchain smoothly without stopping the network. So if you guys have run validator on Iris Network, you will notice that we recently had this on-chain upgrade. We don't have to stop the network and export the state. You just upgrade to the next version in a very smooth way. And we start notice that there's already an issue and PR actively going on in Cosmos SDK, right? That will introduce the on-chain upgradability into the Cosmos SDK. I think the Reagan network is contributing to that, right? So I think all these will improve the cost effectiveness of the validator operation in the long term.
Awesome, thank you. And next point of discussion, I just wanted to bring up or just some arbitrary parameters that we have set for each chains, right? Inflations, and and I know Iris just recently went through a proposal with changing the inflation rate. And would you mind just kind of briefly summarize what happened and how the process went with that?
Yeah, recently, actually, some community members created two separate proposals on Iris Network. One is to reduce the unbonding time from 21 days to 14 days. The other one is to increase the inflation rate from 4% to 5%? I forgot the exact number. And both of these proposals failed to pass. So I think for the first one, I think the reason of it being the reason of it failed is because validators didn't participate actively in voting. I mean, validator is really concerned about the security of the network. Because we have introduced these governance voting features in our Rainbow wallet right before the proposal. So we noticed a lot of the individual delegators participate actively in voting. They really want to see the unbonding time to be reduced to 14 days because they want to be able to get back their money as quickly as possible whenever they want to do that. But this is a community decision as a whole, right? I mean, all the forces or the different roles participate in the process, and we have to respect the result. I mean, from our point of view, right? And in terms of increasing the inflation rate, I mean, the participation level is very low. And I think people just don't like to see the inflation to be too high, right? While we're already in a bear market, we don't want to see a lot of dumping.
But not having enough inflation rate at the same time, that means that validators cannot sustain.
Yeah, but the thing is,
balance.
for Iris Network, the total delegation, I mean, what do you say? The delegation rate is close to 30%. So the effective return for the validator is around 10%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But 10% on Iris and then 10% on Cosmos does not mean the same thing. I get that. Yeah. I mean, I'm talking about the eventual how much it means to the validator.
Right.
Like if it's a smaller value chain, like the validators are not really surviving right now.
Right.
But at the same time, it doesn't mean that you should increase inflation, because that will also then put pressure on the token price itself.
Yeah, and the thing is, actually, no matter how we discuss here, we have to respect the result, right? So someone create a proposal. I mean, anyone can create a proposal to increase the inflation to whatever number, but it has to be voted, right? It has to pass.
Yeah, which is great. That's the whole point about on-chain voting.
Yeah.
But I think what I'm trying to get at is that like the parameters right now, like it's there's arguments to be made on both sides. It's all it's still unclear. There's still a lack of data points. My honestly main concern is that there's a lot of hasty decisions that are made to try to influence parameters too early on, without actually seeing the full effects play out. And like this includes inflation rate. There's some evidence of higher inflation being bad for market cap, but like there's no empirical like studies around this. Like this has yet to be determined really. Even for like slashing rates, like we have 5% for double signing, 0.01% for downtime, but who's to say this is the right exact amount of slashing to do?
Yeah, and the Iris network has different values for those. We have a very low slashing penalty rate, and at the beginning when the network was launched, we didn't even have a penalty for downtime, because we think we want to give some time for the validator to make mistakes and learn in the process.
So in the case for Iris, I'm not sure about Cosmos, but did you do any kind of like theoretical modeling about setting up variables?
Not strict theoretical analysis, but we did do some analysis before the launch.
I don't think anyone protocol has
really.
Yeah, but
I think both Cosmos or Iris, in terms of parameters, it's only been like 7 months since Cosmos came out, and a lot of these things, or next year or two, are going to be very experimental. And like we might do analysis to find the ideal number, but that won't always fit with everyone else. And I think government is about like negotiating with each other and matching opinions. So I feel like it's gonna take a while to find a number which fits into the network better than like what it is right now. And I don't think people, especially slashing, like you don't see that so often. I don't think that people are very aware of these thoughts. So it might take, it shouldn't happen, but it might take some incidences for people to realize that these numbers are important as well.
Okay. You want to add something?
mind?
Go ahead.
So, I'm sorry to bring this up again, but theory, I used to be in physics, so I know the importance of having a theoretical background, and unfortunately, I was not able to observe. It's not only for Cosmos, but Cosmos included. Not a lot of theoretical observations or modeling has been done, and one sad thing about of the blockchain ecosystem is that for incentive structures, there has been a lot of, if you just look it up, if you just look at like mechanism design, there has been a lot of previous research pre-blockchain that has been done, and there's a lot of papers, a lot of academics. However, I think a lot of people are not aware of that. the people who are in charge of designing the protocols itself are not aware. And it's I'm quite sad that even though a lot of brainpower has been put into researching those topics like mechanism design, none of that is coming to fruition in the blockchain space, and it's so sad to see those potentially great opinions being disappearing.
Yeah, and I think as you just pointed out, I mean, it's still a very highly experimental phase of the BPOS system. And before launch, actually, we had several intense discussions internally about how to set these parameters, especially the inflation rate. I mean, as you can notice, we actually didn't adopt that curve in Cosmos Hub. We just made it a simple parameter-controlled inflation model. It's 4%, because we think that the dynamics around the token economics can be so complex that you just cannot use not a linear function to depict that. So it's actually a multivariable dynamic system. So we basically made the decision that we'll just set this parameter and see how it goes, and then make it governable so that people can vote to change it. And this decision may not be correct in itself. So, but we are happy to be able to be part of the history and see how things work out in the Cosmos world.
Okay. Good. Yeah, that was lots of good content and just lots to think about. But before we end, I really do want to end on a high note. So let's switch gears a little bit and just kind of talk about where we're gonna be 7 months from now. So I guess 7 months has taught us quite a bit, mostly on, I think, the very base layer of Cosmos and its economics. I think a lot of what was thought to be, like a lot of assumptions were broken, and I think that was pretty good. Where do we go from now? And how do you, where should we go, and how do you see us getting there?
I don't think I can tell the future, but I definitely, one thing that I can be definitely sure is there will be many more projects built on Cosmos SDK in 7 months. And actually, that's a good thing about our ecosystem, as I just said. When we talk about Cosmos, we're not talking about one blockchain, as with other projects. We're talking about a Cosmos network, and an internet of blockchains. So when you think of, when you compare Cosmos with Ethereum, smart contracts in Ethereum is like different blockchains in Cosmos. So we already start to notice these great projects popping up, like IOV, right, provides a naming service. And what the Forble team is trying to do with the social networking. So I think from my perspective, basically we're developing and operating Iris Network. I just keep reminding myself that I have to be aware of what's coming in the Cosmos network. And when we build a DApp, a distributed application in Cosmos, we're not building a smart contract. We have to integrate with all these capabilities in a network through IBC and through all those innovations. So I think that's a good thing about this this forum. I mean, it's very good. It adds value to the community, so that we sort of eventually will form this industry alliance, so that we know what other people are doing, and we can integrate the capability through IBC, and that's the strong point about Cosmos, and that's why I want to be in this world. Okay.
Yeah, I would like to see more applications, more use cases on blockchain, which is other than DeFi, because yeah, users are not just on finance, not just DeFi, and maybe we can have more applications on encouraging people to, like, for some good cause. Like I was in Edinburgh, and in the University of Edinburgh, they have built they run an experiment that they wrote a smart contract, and then they have an app. If you like, you have made a good deed, then you upload your picture like a proof for doing that good deed, and you can have some kind of token. So maybe we can be more creative. Think how the shared economy model can reach more people. So I think that this is the time that we have to educate more developers and UX designer or some experienced designer that how we can create a different journey a user journey that would adapt the technology on blockchain. Yeah.
As Kwun said, I like to see like more applications using the blockchain, because right now I feel like there are two worlds that are completely apart from them, but then could be connected together, which are like the blockchain development world that we are right now in, and then there's the classic standard development world, which is made of mobile applications, desktop applications, websites, and all the stuff. And I really think we should like come together as a developer point of view, where we see like more mobile website developers, desktop developers, embedded developers developing application on the blockchains. And I really think that right now we could achieve that by creating the tools for developers that already exist to work on the blockchain, like SDKs and all the documentation. We have like a really bad documentation on Cosmos right now. We should definitely improve that. So having those tools, we could bring the classic development world into our world, and we could expand the whole blockchain ecosystem entirely. We could bring up token values, because if we have application and users use those applications, then we have a token sharing between them. So yeah, I think this should be probably the priority, because most of the applications right now are contained inside the blockchain world. But if we don't have the application that common users can use, those projects will be like unused by everyone, so no one will use them.
I agree with the idea that we should see more applications, but because the question was about 7 months later, I think it would be magic to see like revolution of user experience in blockchain within 7 months. It would be great, but I think the possibility is not so high, but I'd still like to see people trying out new things, like more, how do you say it? Not just like experimenting with blockchain and user experience. Like I do believe that no matter how good the protocol is, if you don't get the end users, like it's gonna be hard to go to the moon. And on top of that, in 7 months, last time when we were trying to go to Cosmos Hub 3, there's a little panic and a rollback. And we did roll back nicely, but the process was kind of like panicky and everyone was like shaking. So I think within the 7 months, we will find ways to make governance more like structured so that we are prepared for these situations and tackle it more smoothly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like maybe blockchain was invented because of some financial issues, and like on the Ethereum or even on Cosmos Hubs, there are a lot of accounting issues on them. So people are focusing on finance or accounting problems, but I would like to see if people can think out of the box. Imagine if you turn on the television and the television is actually a node on the network and is doing some work to help changing the global issues. Yeah.
The original question about seven months from now, that's like next year, 2020, is that May?
Yeah, it should be around there.
Yeah, hopefully I'll graduate by then. Anyways, in the case for Cosmos, IBC may or may not come out by then.
Yeah, I'm surprised no one has mentioned IBC so far.
Yeah.
7 months.
Hopefully it's quite usable by then. But in my personal opinion, I think blockchain is somewhat, the technology itself is somewhat mature at this point. Blockchain has been around for like more than 10 years now. And what I'm currently worried about is that I don't see a lot of people that have the capability to think out of the box. Yeah, I think that's very important. If we don't have a convincing enough application for blockchains that people would really use, we might just end up just like the ancient Egyptians. Back then, like they spent a lot of resources and energy and a lot of thinking on how to build a giant tower, I guess, a pyramid made of like stone blocks. Yeah, back then I believe there must have been a lot of technical questions on how to carve those blocks very smoothly. Unfortunately, we might end up just like them if we don't have a usable application for just the general public. Instead of stone blocks, it might be like blocks of data this time. So yeah, maybe 1,000 years from now, people might just look at this big chunks of like data blocks.
Yeah, we have a lot of pyramids.
At least the stone blocks are pretty like.
At least you know the order of the blocks.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, but that's like 1,000-year-old blocks. What's the use of it? To sum up, I really think the ability to think out of the box, to really have an application that people could use. And even though I'm currently doing DeFi, I partially agree that people shouldn't be focusing on DeFi this much, because DeFi currently is not contributing to increasing the total pie of the community. So, like even if you have like staking derivatives or like other lending protocols on blockchains, the general public, like they don't use them. Like it's only the crypto people that uses that. So we're like currently slicing up these a pizza that's the same size. I believe it's time to increase the size of that pie.
Yeah, the pie is constantly decreasing, right? I love how Ryan also did sort of on a pessimistic note. Just because, yeah, 7 months from now, I want to see IBC definitely. That's definitely something I want to see, and more people experimenting on it. And honestly, I wouldn't be really surprised at all if we're at a similar position as we are right now, doing a lot of experimentations and still working on sort of the infrastructure layer of all of this. And I want to say that's okay, because I think it's more important that we build up the infrastructure correctly, and we make sure that we're able to onboard developers and users on a platform that's usable, and user friendly. So while I do want to see mainstream adoption, I also understand that there's a lot of work that needs to be done to get there, and we're nowhere close to that right now at this point. And I am comfortable with that. I do think we'll get there eventually, but there's no reason to rush at this point. And so I'm perfectly fine if we're at the same spot and we have this much of a crowd 7 months from now talking about the Cosmos ecosystem.
Great. Well, thank you everyone, and that'll be it for tonight. If you guys have any questions to any of these guys, feel free to come up and. Oh yeah, go ahead.
So, do you have any idea on the protocol level as a proposal to get more decentralized the voting power across validators? Because I guess top 5 could reach 33%, and on Sentinel testnet we have seen that they can stop as they want.
That's a great question, actually. So we do that anyone. I don't know why everyone's looking at Sunny right there, but Yeah.
Sorry, I mean, on the protocol level, because most of the time the answer is on the educational
Right.
side, and
I know.
users, it doesn't have the tools correctly to, that will not help. So I'm specifically, okay.
So I strongly believe stake power is not how you measure decentralization. It's token distribution. Like validators, like yes, 5 validators might control the majority of the network, but can they cheat? Like if they show any signs of malicious activity, people could just instantaneously switch. There's no zero switching cost here to the network of like switching a validator basically. So I don't think really you should measure decentralization through validators. Rather, you should look at the token distribution and see if there's any big whales that could actually influence, conduct any malicious activities on the network. Yeah, I know many people might not agree with me on that, but it's just look at, look at proof of work. There's 2-3 mining pools that could, basically just do 51% attacks on the network. Will they do that? No, because their miners will just switch over and just like leave them right away. I think there's just an illusion that people will just look at that only one chart and see like, oh, there's only 5 validators that will make up the majority of this chart and just think, oh, this isn't decentralized. But I think you should look carefully at what that chart represents. It is validator stake power, but at the end of the day, do the validators have that much power that's represented there? Not really at the end of the day. There's not much I could do with our 6-7% of the network power, all other than just validate honestly.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions?
Well,
Yes.
I think other
sorry about that.
other people will probably have different opinions on this.
When there is the free market, I think rich get richer is always happening. So yeah, right. So in protocol level, maybe we can think how we can calculate the voting power by not just linear on the number of tokens. There are a lot of different discussions on like using Gini index to calculate the voting power, but not just one-to-one token to voting power. And then maybe, I'm thinking maybe different way of picking block proposal, because although there are a maximum of 5% transaction fee on each block for the block proposal, the block bonus, proposal bonus. But I think, yeah, in the long term, maybe some validators would argue, yeah, in the long term, the opportunity of being a proposer will be the same in percentage, but it won't stop the problem of rich get richer. So if we can think of a way of picking the block proposer, a different way of picking the block proposer, maybe block proposer, different validators could get at least a more fair way of getting the block, the proposal bonus of each block. But I don't think like some mechanism to make the voting power very equal would be a good way on a network like this, because when it's too equal, then the validators tend to be lazy. They're not going to do anything because they think that I can just sit and then I can just wait for the reward by the inflation, or the delegation will be, or the voting power will just be the same. I don't have to work hard. So I think we have to think of a way to balance that. And we would like to do more experiment on decimals, like changing the way of calculating voting power and how we pick proposals.
Can I just add one thing? I think decentralization of voting power, this part is very, very dependent on the initial token distribution, maybe during ICO. So it's very hard to change. But to be extreme, the easiest way would be putting a role, like a fixed role on top of how much voting power you can have, stuff like that. But that's that's not the picture that we want in the future. And I feel like there are still discussions going on within Cosmos community about like decentralization, if it's good or bad, or if we want decentralization, what should we do? I think it will just take time and a lot of governance and a lot of experiment, like you said. Yeah.
I'm happy to talk through some of the attack vectors.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So just to add just one more thing. I'll try to speed up. Yeah, I had a lot of speech time. So decentralization. I think I don't think it's healthy to focus too much on decentralization itself. Focusing too much on decentralization as an ideology. I personally support decentralization, but what I want to say is decentralization might, in the current status, might be similar to like trying to build the perfect pyramid. Like enough is good. Oh, yeah, so, I'm sorry. Yeah, so I think the focus should be on maximizing the social benefit, and the reason why decentralization helps to some degree. For example, Bitcoin. Why is Bitcoin being decentralized helpful to society? Because, just my opinion, but I think having a digital gold, decentralized digital gold that no one can control, is going to be a unique asset type. So, I think we should be focusing on the features that come out of decentralization, and not be stuck on focusing on decentralization itself. Yeah, just to add one more thing there.
Can I add something?
Yeah, absolutely. Would you like to make?
To answer, can I speak about it?
Yeah.
To answer your specific question, so like, can we do anything at the protocol layer to solve it? So I agree that I think what the point of decentralization is to give us high fault tolerance. And so the best way to do this, in my opinion, is that we should punish. Centralization is a problem when it causes fault, and so we should punish it when it causes faults. So I think the best way to solve this is proportional slashing. Proportional slashing basically says that the larger a validator is by stake, let's say a validator has 10% of the stake, and they double sign, they'll get slashed at a higher percentage than someone who only has 1% of the stake. But now, what's stopped me from just splitting Stika into like 8 different validators, right? What I'll do is, if 2 validators fault at the same time, that's even worse. So if 5 validators of 1% each fault at the same time, that's even worse percentage slash than 1 validator of 5%. So this is a disincentive for you to split your validator into multiple, but as a nice side effect, it also is a disincentive it's an incentive for everyone to decorrelate their validators. So if everyone's running on Google Cloud and Google Cloud goes down, everyone is going to be having more liveness faults, and so it's in my incentive to make my setup as different from other validators as possible. So I think that is like in the addressable space of solutions that covers like 75% of it. There might be other solutions, but I think that's like the easiest fruit to pick. Most hanging fruit. Yeah.
Great. Are there any other questions from the audience you'd like to ask?
I just had a quick question. The validators that are on the panel, do you see competition, like for a new zone that comes along? Do you see competition or pressure among validators to support a new chain?
I'm actually not clear about which type of competition you're talking about.
For example, if your competition supports a new chain that comes along, do you see pressure on your validator to then support this other chain as a mechanism for the new chain to get validators?
For me, not really, because if I'm getting the question right, if I'm choosing to join a chain as a validator, I have my standards to evaluate the chain and everything. We might see the same validators again, like our competitors again, but the competition joining a chain is not like a super pressure for us to like hurry and join the chain.
So the reason for the question is, suppose the chain has its own token, And users that are delegating to validators might want this token. And if they do, it could increase the delegation, especially with Atoms as a cross-chain staking token. Does that make sense, or am I looking at
Are you
it the wrong
assuming
way?
that tokens get dropped to the validator's user?
I'm sorry?
Are you assuming that tokens get dropped to the delegators of the validator?
Well, yeah, they would. I mean, so I'm looking at the scenario where atoms are a cross-chain staking token, which is a proposal that's on the table, as far as I know. So therefore, the validator that supports the new chain, by validating on that chain, gains those tokens. And the people that have delegated to that validator would also be gaining those tokens, and that is a mechanism for validators to want to support a new chain because they want to have expose their users to this other token.
So it's a proposal, so it hasn't occurred yet. So we're talking a bit of hypotheticals here, but sure, if like things do play out, like if that zone is something that that users require, like our delegators request, and they say like, oh, we really trust in this zone, yeah, surely we will get pressured into it, especially because then this would automatically mean that our delegators might redelegate to some other validator that actually decides to support that zone. So yes, I think your assumption is correct. But again, hypotheticals, we'll have to see how it plays out in the real world.
No other comments from the panel? Okay.
Hypotheticals.
Yeah. And I'm sure, it's a competition, but also they try to calculate the cost of adding another chain and support for that. So, maybe. Any other questions from the audience? Nope. Sunny, all right.
What project other than your own are you most excited for?
That sounds great.
You think in the Cosmos world, right?
Yeah, or
anything.
How about
Anything.
Solana. Yeah, because I think Solana solved the problem that we always have in space, and yeah, I'm excited to that. Yeah, and it opens another kind of shared economy. You don't really need to be the validators to share to get some shares. You can be replicators, and yeah, it's like a different models.
If there is no rule about not choosing Cosmos, I still think Cosmos is exciting because we still have IBC coming, and everyone's kind of waiting for IBC to happen, and I think it would be the most exciting feature for me to see happen in reality.
Any specific project in Cosmos though that you're the most excited for?
Sorry?
Any specific project in Cosmos you're the most excited for?
Like other like blockchain projects?
Any specific zone that's being built or something like that?
We will be validating for Kava and IOV, and those two projects we think is very interesting. IOV in the perspective that I shortly said in my presentation is star names. It might seem very simple that the blockchain address will just become a name, but from that point, I feel like you can do so much more with like identity and Kava with DeFi, and when IBC comes along, I want to see like what kind of assets will come into Kava as well.
The correct answer is E 2.0. And then for Cosmos ecosystem projects, we will announce our grantees. We're excited about 2 projects so far, and we're going to provide grants to them, but be on the lookout for the announcement on that when Cosmos Hub 3 launches. So we should coordinate that.
Straight edge.
Yeah, I still don't know the name of the project, but I think it will be the DEX that can challenge finance DEX at least. That garners all the power of the Cosmos ecosystem, all the stable coins, all the other services offered by all the chains that can offer a competitive DEX.
So I gotta make a comment. So if it's non-blockchain, then probably advances in energy technology. But blockchain, I'm especially interested in payment currencies with applied demerge systems. So that hasn't been experimented on a wide scale in any economy. I think that's one of the most interesting. If I limit that to Cosmos,
Everett.
5 seconds. 5, 4,
It's Everett. It's
3,
Everett.
1.
Just exploded.
That's okay.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess one-
Sorry,
Yeah, sure.
Hard question.
So yeah, don't you think that those that this new movement like ICO initial chain offering in Cosmos is not actually damaging the Cosmos environment? Because you see like we've seen so many different chains, but not really focusing on capturing intrinsic value and not actually just like actually focusing on just implementing a chain for the sake of having a token, which is like a double side of the sword. Basically, starting a new chain for a token to raise money and then incentivizing other validators to just join the chain, but there is no actually intrinsic value behind the chain. So what happened in the ICO in Ethereum almost crashed Ethereum because those many ICO there was most of all of scams. So don't you think that in Cosmos, the community should actually build a system to analyze and to signal if a project is actually capturing value, or do you think it's just like matters of the validators, they choose the chain, they want to choose the chain?
Like, are you suggesting hiring auditors or something? Creating an audit team?
Yeah, I mean that's the most. I mean, auditors, oracles, like people that analyze a project and say, okay, this is good. Because at the end of the day, it's a family, but it's actually an attack vector inside the Cosmos environment. If you accept any project, I mean not accept because it's decentralization, but you can actually signal and build auditing system that will verify that it's not actually damaging the ecosystem.
I'm concerned about, so like auditing systems, like it's going to be off-chain, right? We need to trust the auditors. Whoever, like, my concern there is that, like,
it's not really, it's really like about transparency, so you can actually write. What I feel like is missing in the Cosmos environment is some people that have choose opinion and say, okay, I don't think this is actually a good project, I think this is a good project, because this is actually not.
If you build an anonymous maybe forum like that, that might be interesting, actually. But I just don't think there should be like a
No, because imagine if you build like all those different networks and they have a token, and at the end, in a couple of months, there's no value. This will be damaging the ecosystem of Cosmos for sure.
Yeah, I agree, but like the system you're suggesting is an auditor, right? Or
no, I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just bringing the problem.
But I guess the forum idea might be interesting.
Yeah, might be. Yeah.
Because just having validators and people just talk on forums.
Because at the end of the day, it's like bringing 100 validators resources for something that probably we're getting to fail 100% sure.
I think you bring up a good point actually, because there are definitely projects that just say it's Tendermint based or Cosmos SDK.
Yeah, every single day. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So like we're seeing the same thing.
Yeah.
And
this was like big dangerous for Ethereum.
Yeah, and I also do think it's pretty dangerous for the Cosmos ecosystem as well. I totally agree. And we make one mistake and we lend our validity to a potentially like scamming algorithm.
The door is open,
yeah.
So it's like inside.
And then we act like as a social signaling mechanism to other validators, and we're just amplifying the problem.
Yeah, which is even worse than the ICO, because here is like for example, if you take capital or like stakefish saying, okay, we go for this chain, and people believe in that, they're gonna invest money.
Yeah.
So, sorry.
Oh, no, it's all good. It's just that our time's up. There's more stuff going on afterwards. So thank you guys for all coming, and great thanks to big thanks to Riccardo and Daniela for putting this together. And yeah. looking forward to what happens in Cosmos ecosystem. All right, have a good night, everyone.